The Last of Us Season 2 finale has just dropped with Episode 7 Convergence, capping off a season full of highs, lows, and plenty of online debate. But some major questions still linger in the shadows. Did the season end on the right note? Is Season 2 a good adaptation of the games? The Marsman crew assembles once again to review this episode and answer these important questions. Let's jump into it. What's up, guys? I'm Frank, joined with Haki. This is our Last of Us Season 2 Episode 7 Convergence review from a gamer's perspective. And so, like we've done each and every week, we're going to give you the good, the bad, our final verdicts on this episode, and then we're going to answer a really important question, I think, and that is, since the season's ended, I know it's not the full capture of the game yet, right? We have all their seasons coming, but is this first part a good adaptation, a good video game adaptation? And like I've said each week, I have experience with the game, Haki doesn't, so you're getting two completely different perspectives. And let's start with this specific episode and the good about it. And I tell you what, this was another, there's another supporting character I think that stood out in this episode, and that is Jesse. I think this was a strong Jesse episode. You finally got a little bit more, you got hints of it from Jesse throughout the season, but this was a strong one, kind of showcasing him a little bit more, his dynamic, his feelings about certain things. And I thought he did really well. I mean, we've seen at times these quote-unquote support characters kind of stand out in some of these episodes, and this is definitely one of them. And Jesse, I thought, did a really good job in this one. So, he showed strong emotion. He showed his dynamic character. It was good. Now, there were some things that I will be questionable about. Him and Ellie have, I thought, a pretty decent dynamic, but there were some things that they've written in this. They made it kind of hypocritical, but I don't really blame the dynamic between the two characters. I thought that was run pretty well. Secondly, boy, was this an episode. We talked about this Haki week after week, the environment. This was one of those episodes that showcased that with the storms, with all that. There was some really good environmental stuff here. The set pieces, again, continued to shine through. What is your good for this episode?
Yeah, so we know Seattle, right? Really raining. Like you said, the environment, they've kind of killed it all throughout this season. And even the first season, the environment's definitely been one of the strongest. But I definitely want to kind of shed light on kind of how amazing this show does, and the fact where it just rips your heart out in some instances and kind of just punches you right in the gut. When you think things can't get worse, they do get worse. It's a really, really messed up show, and we're going to go into it in the spoilers. Really, the last 20% of this episode, I was like screaming at the TV in disbelief. And I'm assuming the video game, and you'll have to kind of speak to this, I'm assuming the video game is as kind of cutthroat as a TV show. I know they're able to do different things in TV shows than they are in video games, but this show, pretty much throughout this entire season and last season, there are just points where the show just absolutely rips your heart out. And I think that's one of the best things about this episode, especially at the end. Yeah.
And again, like I said, I have the experience, so I kind of knew some of the stuff coming. Haki does not. So this is why interested take there. And yes, we are going to do our spoiler discussion after our final verdicts, going into the next part of the show. But let's now move into the bad. And what I will say about this, I talked about the problems we've had all season long with this. Kind of the thorn in the side of this show has been the pacing. And last week, I thought pacing, which has been a problem, they handled it well last week, which is why it was one of the highest episodes, in my opinion. The highest for me. This week, the pacing once again rears its ugly head. And there is... And we'll go into the show as a whole on why this season, we'll talk about it afterwards, but the pacing here is super fast, and they do make changes again to the game. And again, I've talked about this so many times, like we both did. Changes to the source material, I don't have a direct problem with if it adds value. And I feel like they're making changes to the source material, some that were hits and some that were misses. And usually the ones that are a miss is because it adds no value. And so we'll talk about a couple scenes that they do change. They also, the pacing to me makes it so fast that I feel like, you talked about how dark it was. The game is much darker. And so they've watered this guy down a little bit because a fear of maybe the general audience to tune them out. They're afraid of making some of the characters look worse than they are. And I do think it kind of hurts the episode and the season overall, because of how fast they have to go and really walk your hand through this instead of creating tension, letting tension build, and then that explosion. They show the tension, they solve the tension, they move to the next part, right? So I wish the pacing was different, and we'll talk about this as the season ender, but Hockey, I know is going to come up for you right off the bat. I'm going to leave it to you because it was one of my bad, but I'll leave it to you. What is a bad for you in this episode?
All right. Yeah, man. Listen, a lot of walking around with guns, but not a lot of shooting the guns until, the end. I talked the last 20% of the episode I thought was fantastic, but and it goes back to pacing, like you said, and the show and tell that you've been alluding to the whole season, right? And there was one big missed opportunity with these Seraphites, the Scars, however you want to, talk about them, but a big missed opportunity where they could have not only told us, hey, something's going on, the village, whatever you want to say, but let's actually go to the fight and see the wolves versus the Seraphites. And they've done this for me. They've done this throughout the entire episode. I've seen little tidbits here and there of the Seraphites and the wolves, but not an actual super direct conflict, which I've been waiting for. I still really don't know who the Seraphites are, so I think they missed a big one here, and they've been doing it throughout the entire season. So that's definitely the big bad for me.
And you know what it is, Hockey? I'll just let you know. I'm not going to spoil it for everyone. It's a preview because there's the next season, which is showing a different perspective. So they kind of like dangle these little items in front of you. Like, what's that cool thing over there? No. Keep your eyes focused on this. There's something cool going on over there, but we can't show you that yet because they're saving it. So that's the frustrating part. They're telling us, they're not showing us. You're going to have to wait. So it just shows you kind of the design they want to do. Another thing, and again, don't want to spoil, no infected. So just brace that. I know that's a kind of a bit of a spoiler. I'm sorry, but just going in knowing this is a lot of human to human issues here, and you're not going to get heavy infected. I also didn't really feel like a season finale. Did you feel like it was a season finale, the way the episode was structured? It didn't really feel that way. Because of the awkward.
Yeah, it felt like, and you had mentioned this before, it felt like they kind of just stopped in the middle of a season, and we kind of know that they did. They split it in half, and you were the one that was saying, I wonder where they're going to actually stop this. So I'm interested, dude. Did they stop it where you think they were going to stop it?
Right short of it. So I actually thought they were going to go a little further, but again, the pacing would have been even worse. So they did save a little bit on the pacing end, but it was at the spot, but they cut it even shorter at it, so it made it another awkward moment, which we'll talk about in spoiler. But with that, let's get into the final verdict. And this has been a very big conversation, a lot of debate. And I'll talk about this on our next question, which is going to be the big one. But one thing I'll say about this episode, the environments have been stunning. The directing for the environments, the set pieces, the designers who make it, the way they set up, the environments, small little details like Ellie goes into water, has to clean off the bullets. Again, not all of it is great, but they do work on some of those details to make things look pretty sensational. And to create that tension just from an environmental standpoint has really, set the stage very well. They have done that all season. They did it last season, but just focusing on season 2, they have done that, and it shows that here. And then again, you get some of those really strong performances. Some of these actors have really performed well. Some, not so much. And to me, Jesse's one that stood out. For the bad, I said it before. Pacing has been a huge thorn, and then Ellie has been so inconsistent. We'll talk about that. To me, in this one is, again, you saw two sides of it. Ellie's inconsistency on full display in this episode, where it's like one moment it's like this, she's like this way, another moment she's like this way, and it's just so it's whiplash. And that's the part that hurts for me, plus that cutoff. Very strange cutoff. I knew it was going to be awkward. They delivered on the awkwardness. They really did. And so a very awkward end. Didn't feel like a series finale. Felt like a build-up to a series finale. So I give it a 7 out of 10. Again, slightly above average for me. A weird end, and it feels like, again, a part 1 ender of a season, not a full season ender. I'd hate when they do this kind of stuff, but they had to cut it at a certain point. They chose the point that they did, and it was a bit awkward. So I'm a 7 out of 10. Hockey, your final verdict as the non-Last of Us 2 player.
As the non-Last of Us video game player, yeah, man, I'm a full point ahead. I'm assuming that you could have guessed that throughout this entire season. I've pretty much been a full point ahead of you, and I think it has to do with the dynamic that I didn't really play the video game, so I'm not seeing some of the things they might have missed and they could have added from the video game. But listen, I thought this one was good. It didn't really, do it for me in the combat or obviously the infected, area, because there were no infected and there wasn't really a whole lot of combat, or like I said, a whole lot of shooting of the guns, at least in the last 20% of the episode. But I think they did pretty well. You had some good acting, as you said, from Jesse. But yeah, man, they missed on a few things. It would have been a 7. It would have been probably a low 7 for me, but that 20%, that last scene was just unreal, and it punched me right in the gut, and I was literally screaming at my TV. It was one of my, I don't know if I even want to say favorite scenes. It was like one of like the craziest scenes and like the most messed up scenes, I think, since Joel's daughter got popped in like the first episode.
Yeah.
So I'm at an 8 now.
And I'm excited to hear your take on it as we go into it. But now let's get to the big one. And is season 2 of The Last of Us a good video game adaptation? And Haki, I know you didn't play the game, but you've been here spoiler discussion after spoiler discussion for each episode. And so I'm going to start off this, and I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff out. And I want to hear your take on it, and for our audience to hear. And before we do, make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button to help support the channel. Consider becoming a member for some additional perks, some premium perks for new content. Let us know what you liked and disliked in the episode in the comments below. And so when I go back to this question, this huge one, it's going to be a ton of debate. I think this doesn't classify as a bad adaptation. I think if you're looking for something that's going to tell you kind of the big points of interest on how the game goes for this perspective, which is Ellie's perspective, I think it delivers on telling the story. So I still classify this as a good adaptation for part 2 for a story, overall story. They did make changes, but for the main components of the story, I think they delivered on it. What they did a bad adaptation, in my opinion, is Ellie. I think they did a poor adaptation of Ellie. And I'll talk about the reasons why, but I know there's so much discussion here, and I'm going to give you guys some numbers. So there was so much talk about will The Last of Us fall off after what happened in episode 2. And my thoughts are this. So HBO comes out, IGN reports on it. The Last of Us Season 2, 37 million viewers per episode globally, which is 5 million more than what they averaged in Season 1. So you're seeing more people are watching the show overall on an episode-to-episode basis. The audience grew. The problem, though, you see at the end, the season finale, now it's Memorial Day weekend. This could play a huge part. The season finale had 3.7 million viewers. That is a drop off the season 1 finale, 8.3 million. So the concern was a lot of people watching and then they started tailing off? Or was it Memorial Day weekend contributed to it pretty big? So those are some interesting numbers, but I do think from an overall perspective, I think this is a step down from season 1. And I wanted to get Haki's thoughts on this. I think it's a step down from season 1. There's no question, in my opinion. Season 1, listen, we talk about pacing, we talk about, all the things that season 1 struggled with. We wanted more infected. But you got an understanding because it was an introduction to the world, right? Everyone, they had to convince the general audience to like Last of Us. They had to convince HBO to like Last of Us. So you needed to deliver episode on episode, and you couldn't kind of play around here because you were limited. Now you can convince the world Last of Us is legit. This time around, and they brought it up, last week, the showrunner says there are going to be actually 4 seasons of The Last of Us to tell this complete game. If there's 4 seasons, and we're finding out last week, wouldn't this be a great opportunity to let this bad boy breathe out a little bit? I mean, I can't believe last week is when you're figuring out, all right, we might need a season 4. That's something you got to figure out right out of the gate, because now that could have helped this season's pacing. Instead, now, like, what, season 4 is going to be, what, 5 episodes? Because you're pretty much, if you're going by the pacing you're going, there's not going to be a ton in season 4. So you're creating new stuff. Like, that's the thing. They talked about they're not going new material outside of the game. So I do like they're not doing the Game of Thrones, but you're figuring out you need a 4th season now. And I think the general audience agrees, Hockey. If you look at IMDb, which we know about Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified on Rotten Tomatoes at 94% with over 230 reviews. The critics give it the okay. The viewers, it's at 39%. There's no way it's 39. We know why it's that low from episode 2. So I hate using Rotten Tomatoes on shows sometimes because once you get review bombed, they just deliver it no matter what. But IMDb, from a show perspective, I think is more valuable. And if you look, the average for season 1 from IMDb, 8.7. One of the highest averages for a live adaptation of a video game. This season, 7.6. So it's a full point down. I think the general audience also agrees. This is a step down. Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it's without question a step down. Now, is that it's higher than Minecraft? It's higher than, the Halo show. It's higher than, the Mario movie on IMDb. But you could tell it's not the same level as season 1, and it's not, to me, Fallout, which is averaged 8.3. Edge Runners, Arcane. So you could tell it took a step down. And the big issue to me, number 1 is pacing. Number 1 issue. Clear. And then number 2, Ellie. And Bella Ramsey is a big topic of conversation. She's going to take all the bows and arrows. Part of it, I didn't think she did a great job because she's constantly playing dumb. She's like, Ellie is a conflicted character in the game, and it still feels like, but once some events happen, the descent into madness and revenge is a steep one. And I feel like they're watered her down. So part of it, I think, was Ellie. Part of it was the writers, in my opinion, trying to say, we don't want the audience to see this, our main protagonist, become what she becomes at the game. And I feel like they're battling it. That's why it was so inconsistent. At times they wanted to do it close to the games, and at times they're pulling back. And I think those are the two big issues with this. Yes, they made some changes. Some of them were a hit. Some of them I thought did well. Some of them added no value, was a mistake. But those two issues, I think, Hockey, are the big one, because we did get infected. Right? I think we got more infected in this season than we did in season 1 from overall. So it wasn't an infected thing. But those two issues, to me, are the biggest one. Hockey, I know I said a lot, dropped a lot of numbers at you, but what are your thoughts? Do you think this is a good adaptation? I say good, but a step down, a real step down from season 1. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, man. I think season 1 overall was a better season, just at its absolute core. But, dude, I still think that just in general, I don't know if I want to say top tier, but The Last of Us, for me, for someone who didn't play the video game, but obviously you guys have talked to me about The Last of Us for years, I think that I would still consider it a good adaptation. I think it's top tier regardless. Listen, it has the core of what the video game has, right? We always talk about that. That's in the show. You have the environment is fantastic. The traumatic experiences are unbelievable. The infected are fantastic. The human conflict, even though I didn't get the human conflict that much in the Seraphites versus the Wolves as I wanted to, there still is a great portrayal of what a post-infected world would be like. So I think they really captured the video game. And let me tell you, Frank, even after the first season, I wanted to go and play the video game. After this season as well, dude, I want to go and play the video game. So if that tells you anything, dude, that tells you that it is a good adaptation. It is a TV show that makes someone who's never played the video game before want to go and play the video game. Now, you cannot say that when we're talking about Halo. If someone has never played Halo and the first thing they did was watch the Halo show, there is no shot that they even want to come close to the video game, because it was just absolute opposite of what Halo really was. I think that The Last of Us, although that it was a step down, like you said, The Last of Us, even the season 2 was still a top tier video game adaptation, and I enjoyed this season. 4 seasons, I don't think it should happen, but 3 seasons, I get it. I just hope, like you said, they kind of fix the pacing and they figure it out. And, listen, stay close to that core of the video game. That's where you're getting everything from, and you'll be good.
Yeah, and again, 4 seasons. I wish you should have planned that ahead of time, right? That was the big one, because now season 3 feels like we're going to get those things you're asking for, Aki, coming in season 3, man. They're going to go back and talk about all that stuff. So it's like, wow, season 2 is feels like a step down, and like season 3 things going to pick up. That's the frustrating part about kind of how this all set up. But what are your thoughts? Do you think The Last of Us season 2 was a good adaptation as the first part, quote unquote, of the game? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. And now let's move to the spoiler discussion. All right, Aki, we talked a bunch. Let's just kind of quickly go through spoiler. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We'll break it into 3 parts. First part I want to talk about, again, we won't go line by line, but just talking about the dynamic between Jesse and Ellie. So it starts off, Jesse's pushing an arrow through Dina's leg that you saw in the previous episode. Nasty scene right there. And she talks about how she can't die. Not that, and we'll pick up on this. So he wants to give her a drink. She refuses. He pushes it through. Ellie comes back from the hospital incident, runs into Dina and kind of tells her, she asks, do you know where Abby is? And she says, she found Nora. And she says good. And she said, did you get where Abby is? And she mentions that she only uttered 2 words, which was wheel and whales. Now, this is different from the game. They do have this conversation. The cleaning scene does happen in the game, but Ellie does find out, Nora does tell her where she is. So doesn't necessarily has to put all these puzzle pieces together. He does tell her. She doesn't really reveal to Dina what happened with the Joel stuff. So she reveals also why this group came after them and that she knew. So now Dina gets this, why didn't you tell me? It makes a little more sense why they came after Joel, and that we need to go, we need to head home. That's kind of the thing is you held this from us. This is obviously important context here on, why this events occurred, and they're finding out now, and Ellie's known this whole time because we saw in the previous episode in the flashbacks that she found out conversation on the porch, right? So that wasn't shared until now. So showing again Ellie's quest for revenge will even put her allies in the line of fire. And that's kind of the important distinction here. But, some of that didn't happen. Then Jesse and Ellie have to go to the bookstore. They're trying to meet up with Tommy. Jesse confronts Ellie about Dina's pregnancy. They get to the bookstore. Well, first they run into they have to hide because these wolves are chasing the Scar. The Scar is this kid. They beat up on him. They undress him and they kind of drag him off to go get executed. And Ellie wants to go save him. Now, this is, again, not part of the game, and this is where the inconsistencies that I have here will start, because Ellie wants to go save the kid, trying to show that she's trying to be the hero here, but this is very different from the game, because Ellie is so laser-focused on revenge. She does run into both these groups fighting this war here, and has to deal with both of them, but she's not trying to play the hero. Right? She's so focused and she doesn't really care about this other stuff that's going on. She's just trying to get exactly what she's looking for. And so this kind of thing felt a little out of place. And again, like Aki, there was a lot of telling us, not showing us. They do bash him, but again, they hide. Jesse's like, what are we doing? Why would we help them? There's 6 of them. It makes no sense to, right? Stay focused on the mission, which does make sense. I don't understand why Ellie's kind of going off that path. Doesn't make a ton of sense, right? But she's trying to play the hero. They're trying to show more of her humanity. And before I skip, when Ellie spoke to Dina about what she did to Nora, torturing her, that's kind of that dark side you saw. But then she brings up, did Nora really deserve it? Right? So this is the inconsistencies that we're talking about, right? So from the game to the show, they're trying to water Ellie's descent down. They're getting some of that rage, which we'll see in another scene, but then they're trying to water it down where Ellie questions, did Nora deserve me bashing her? You don't get that same thing in the game. The scene at the end, you get kind of that reality check for Ellie, but at this moment, that's not happening. Ellie's a very stone cold killer, and you're getting that kind of, oh, she's still the hero. Like, they're trying to, instead of letting this thing tell its own tale and letting this descent build. So they're constantly, that's what's so weird about this, Aki. I want to get your thoughts on these kind of two big scenes. Then we had a conversation about Isaac on they can't find Abby and Abby's group. And then why is Abby so important? Because Isaac sees Abby as the next leader. So that's the first section. Good to see Isaac. Whenever he's on camera, actor's a very good job. You can feel that, like he gets more, which I love. He gets more face time in the show than we see him in the game. So I love that. I love the Isaac stuff. But Haki, all those thoughts there that I kind of discussed in that first section of the game. I thought Jesse was strong, but you're seeing kind of the inconsistencies from our main protagonist in Ellie.
Right, yeah. I mean, this part was a little slow for me, a little boring. I mean, you got to see, Ellie and Dina, their relationship kind of go to the bad side, right? After Ellie tells Dina everything, you can kind of see Dina just like lay back down and say, hey, we need to go home, She kind of sees Ellie's selfishness. And even when Ellie is with Jesse, you've said this before where like Ellie is almost like kind of dumb, like she thinks with her gun and not with her brain, like 2v6, she wants to go out and be the hero, but she can't. Like she always seems to need to be saved. Like she's always being saved by Jesse or by Joel, by Tommy. So they kind of portray her as just like a dumb person with a gun, that only thinks with her gun and nothing else, doesn't have brains. Dina had to be the brains of the operation. So this part was kind of slow. Like I said, dude, whenever Isaac is in the scene, I am very happy because he's a very, very good actor, but they just don't give him the screen time. I mean, you're saying that they give him more screen time here than in the video game, but I mean, we saw him, 2 episodes ago? And it was a very good episode. And then we didn't see him for a whole episode. So I wasn't that happy that I saw him here because he was here for a minute or two of the show. So, I'm happy when there's infected and when there's good acting and good writing. And the first 80% of this episode was really slow and kind of lethargic for me.
Yeah, and I will say this. You mentioned about making Ellie look dumb. Ellie might not be like book smart, right? We've kind of gotten that. But in the game, she is clever and she is conniving. And you even see that in season 1. Remember with the radio, with Joel, when they send messages through the radio, Bill and Frank, about trouble coming or anything like that. She helps decipher that right out of the gate. So she's a clever person, and they do not make her that here. I don't understand. And that's, I think, part of the reason why I've Ellie's kind of been outshined by these co-stars. Like Joel obviously is a main character, so that one's kind of expected, especially in season 1. But in this season, Dina's been kind of outshining Ellie, and that's kind of I think part of it is I don't think this was the top performance by Bella Ramsey, but I also think part of the writing is just like they feel like they're fighting within themselves on, do they want to stay close to the game or do they want to water her down and make her more, a likable character? And I think that struggle kind of shows. Then we get to the next part, which is they get to an overpass. So they get to the bookstore. They hear on the radio that there's a sniper unidentified. They're mapping out. They're thinking it's Tommy. They get to an overpass. Ellie, using her binoculars to see out in the distance, sees a Ferris wheel, brings up the notes that Nora said to her, the words, and then finds the whale, and she realizes that's what she's talking about, the aquarium. Jesse wants to go after Tommy, which is in a different direction. This is a difference in the game here. So part of the reason they changed that story about Tommy, didn't go after didn't go after Abby first, didn't go after the group, that Tommy's actually looking for Ellie and Dina and them. So Ellie, they hear that Tommy's, they're calling for backup. Tommy's fighting a group. And in this one, Ellie's like, Abby's at the aquarium. Jesse's like, did you just hear, we don't know if Like, we have to go help Tommy. And she's like, we don't know if it's Tommy. That part's in because they don't reveal that it's Tommy. They just think it's an unmanned. You kind of get the hint, but she's like, we don't know if it's Tommy. And in the game, she says the best thing we can do for Tommy is to go after Abby, kind of making the assumption that Tommy's also going for Abby. So if we go after Abby, that's a good chance that we'll run into Tommy. That's how they kind of connect that. In this one, it's just blatant, like, Tommy can fend for himself. I have to get what I want, which is revenge. Right? And then she talks about the vote, and then it's revealed that Jesse didn't vote yes. He voted no. So it's kind of this big, the big reveal that he was actually one of the no's. And so she tries to bring up what the reason is. Jesse gave a story, kind of story before in the bookstore about he fell in love with someone that was leaving the community and he didn't go with them because he felt like Jackson was his home, that they raised him. So he brings up the community now in this part, and he's saying, it wasn't what's best for the community. And now the truth comes out of Ellie. And she says, F the community. And she talks about it, how the community died for her when Joe got beaten to death. And that's pretty much the gist of it, right? And Jesse made the thing that, I didn't vote yes because you only do this stuff for you. You don't do it for anybody else. So they have the big fight. And Ellie kind of makes the claim that Jesse, you let a kid die earlier, right? You're no better than me. So she's trying to give herself the reason on why she's justified in thinking and doing what she's thinking. Jesse says, I hope you make it, which that part's in the game. So they have some parts in the game, some parts that are not, right? And so the scene overall is pretty similar. Some of the lines are similar, but the motivations still based on revenge, but like kind of the setup to it was definitely different. Then Ellie goes to a boat, gets to the boat. Now in the game, this is like a boat scene. You have to drive the boat through like a washed up, like a flooded city to get to the aquarium. And this is the part where Haki that gets a little bit ridiculous to me. So she gets thrown overboard, which does happen in the game as well. Now the difference is she swims. She's close to the aquarium. She has to swim the rest of the way there. The boat's gone. And this time around, she gets capsized. They get brushed up onto the island. This happens to be the Scar Island. This is not in the game. Ellie gets to the island later, but this is not in the game. So they kind of reenact a scene from Abby on the island. Now, I'm curious to see if we see this scene, or did they just substitute it for Ellie? But she gets on the island. There's a little kid who's a Scar, who's, I guess, a lookout, runs back, grabs him. They pick up Ellie, who's practically almost drowned. She gets to the island. They're carrying up to get hung and gutted, like we've seen in the previous episodes in the park. And then they're trying to ring her up, and then a siren goes off. Right? First, they look at the little kid. I thought it was kind of funny, and the kid's kind of like the Emperor. He does like the slice thing, but it's like almost like, yeah, it's almost like the thumbs down. And they were going to kill her. Siren goes off. They've realized the village, and the lady says, leave her so that they can go back to the village. Ellie gets out of it, gets back on the boat, heads to the aquarium. And now this is the part, Haki, where it's like, I'm consistent here. Changes to the material, I am not 100% against. I hate when everyone's got to be the same exact thing as there's some things in games you can't do in a movie or show, right? Because you're playing it. It's a game. This is, you're watching it. This is the kind of stuff, though, that does drive me crazy. It's making this change and adding something that had what value to... What were they trying to show me here? We already know when the Seraphites gutted the wolf that they're vicious. Stringing her up, then dropping her last minute to create this tension. But what was it for? You created tension and solved it in the same scene. Nothing built. What was the result for it? Nothing. And she gets back again to the aquarium. But Haki, thoughts on this big scene between Ellie and Jesse, kind of revealing Ellie's real thoughts. That community, Joel is her community, maybe Dina, but everybody else, not so much. And Jesse is about the group. And then obviously this new scene, which was not in the game.
Yeah, so the Jesse Ellie scene I thought was pretty good. Again, decent dialogue. You get to see a little bit of a character arc with Ellie. You know, she's pretty much only out for revenge. She's very selfish. Again, you know, not wanting to go and try and save Tommy and team up and then possibly go. All she wants to do is find Abby. So I think you know, Jesse, you know, very well acted. And you can see that he actually cares for the community, you know, the full community, where Ellie, like you said, only cares about pretty much herself now, and getting revenge, but only really cared about Joel, doesn't really care about Tommy, obviously, and, you know, maybe cares about, you know, Dina. But then we get to, you know, I think one of possibly like the worst scenes because of how bad they messed up and how cool it could have been, right?
Yeah.
The whole Ellie getting hit by a rogue wave, you know, like it was Poseidon or whatever, like threw the wave at her. I thought it was ridiculous. She capsized. I don't know if she had a life jacket on. I don't think she did, but she was wearing a backpack the whole time, like a really heavy backpack. You know, she doesn't drown. She ends up getting washed up.
That was very game-like right there. Okay. That was very game-like.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like that. Right? What a game scenario! You got the backpack on, but you'll swim your way up,
right.
And yeah.
Right, everything's good. You survive. You don't drown. You know,
yeah.
fully clothed,
yeah.
Big backpack on, guns and everything on you. You know, so I thought again that was really silly. She goes on Scarred Island. Right here, I'm like, all right, dude, I'm about to see some really cool stuff. Let me see some Seraphite action. And when they even said like, oh my God, the village is being attacked, I was like, all right, awesome. Cut to that. Let me see some like cool Seraphite Scar versus Wolf. And then, you know, we don't need to see Ellie get back into the boat and spend 5 minutes, you know, motorboating all the way to the aquarium.
Yep.
They could have shown anything, literally any type of conflict at the village between the Scars and the Wolves, and they didn't. And that's one of the worst scenes, I think. It's one of the worst wastes of time.
Yes.
In this show, possibly throughout the first and second season. Obviously, the first season had a full episode. Although the episode was okay, it was a serious waste of time as well. They could have done other stuff. So they have this scene that takes 10 minutes out of a 50-minute show where they could have shown us something that made sense and actually had some gravity to it, like you said, and they didn't. They, you know, Ellie gets capsized in the boat. She lands on an island. You know, she has a little bit of a conflict.
Then she gets back to the boat. Yeah.
You know,
and then you see the explosions going on in the background. And again, to me, if you're adding this scene that's not in the game, I'm okay. It's creating attention. But why didn't you? This was a good moment to show the resourcefulness, the grit, the cleverness of Ellie, how she gets out of it. And it could have been some gunfight going on, like between the Scars and some wolves. You don't have to show the entire battle because I know where they're saving it for. Season 3. That's what season 3 is for. But okay, show some conflict and how Ellie gets out of this predicament using her cleverness. Right. We need more of that because that's what she was in the game. She was clever. She was tough. This was a good moment, not let her go. By the grace of God, thank goodness the wolves attacked the island at this moment that I got lucky, right? I know that's a video game-ish thing, but can we have seen some cleverness from Ellie? That was a huge missed opportunity in my mind. Again, it's just like, what's the point? What's the point? What was the purpose? There was none. That it's just showing the Scars, you know that they're brutal too. Yes, we know this. We saw them gut someone before. What was the point of this one? I don't know. So she gets to the aquarium. She's going through the hallway. She dries off the bullets, which I thought was a good detail because I know people are going to get nuts. She was practically swimming deep into water, and she's going to have a wet gun and just start blasting. That's not how this works. But she dries off the bullets, and then she goes to the room, and then she finds Mel and Owen arguing. So they're arguing, talking about Abby. Owen's talking about going after Abby, that she's out on the island. Or somewhere, right? We don't know exactly. So they say he's going to go after him. He'll come back here in about 30 minutes. If you want to leave without him, go ahead. And she says, F you, Owen. And all of a sudden she spots, it's Ellie. Guns drawn. And she's asking them, where's Abby? They say that they don't know. She's saying, BS. She heard you talking about him. And then she does the similar line that Joel did in season 1 when they went into the wilderness and they say, point to the map. One person points to the map, second person's got to point to the same spot or there's going to be an issue, right? So they're both drawn. Ellie tells Mel to get her the map. Owen says, I'll do it. So he starts slowly walking towards it. There's a gun on the second shelf. He tries to pull it. Well, first, before that, a big line to me was that Owen's telling Mel, she's going to kill us anyway, so don't say anything. And Ellie says, I'm not like you, right? So she kind of makes this distinction. She's trying to make the distinction that, no, I'm not that kind of person, right? I'm not the same as you. And so Owen slowly walks. He tries to pull the gun. Ellie shoots him through the throat, and the bullet goes through his throat and clips Mel. And so Mel's now bleeding out of her neck. Owen's dead on impact. Mel gets to the ground, she's bleeding out, and she rips open the shirt, and she's pregnant. Oh boy. So she's calling Ellie over, she's bleeding out, and she say, try to cut out the baby. This does not happen in the game. This was actually the darkest, this is the darkest thing that they did in season 2. So she says to cut out the baby, and Ellie can't do it, and she ends up, like, she's dying, Mel. And in her mind, she's thinking that Ellie's doing a good job. Like she's actually cutting the baby out. But she bleeds out and dies, and thus the baby dies. I'll tell you what happens in the game. Okay? So, they both die. That's exactly how things go. Ellie kind of wants to take Mel as like the hostage for Owen to show where Abby is. Owen does charge at Ellie. Ellie shoots him, but then Mel tries to go after Ellie with a knife, and Ellie stabs her in the throat. And while Owen and Mel are dying, she goes up to Owen to try to get where Abby's out of him, and Owen says she's pregnant to Mel, and then Ellie goes to Mel and sees that she is pregnant, and then Mel dies there. And so that scene between Mel and Ellie doesn't happen about cutting the baby out, but and then it breaks Ellie, which it does in both of these. Really powerful scene. And this was an important part because, to me, this was the moment where Ellie has been so bloodlust, so focused on revenge. This was the moment where it kind of, reality just, bam, hits her. And you saw it in that episode. That scene, not to say episode, you saw it in this scene where it's like reality strikes in about, what did I just do? Right now, yeah, Ellie was defending herself, but what did I just do? Right? So she kills not only the two of Abby's friends, but a baby as well. And it kind of reminds, again, Dina's pregnant. So it really does hit Ellie hard here. A dose of reality about some of the actions that have been taken. The problem is, as dark as this scene was, they do take away a scene with the dog that we get friendly with. That does not happen here. They did not want PETA to come after them, even though, again, it's HBO. I thought they would show the full picture. They did not do it. So that they took that part out. And then Tommy and Jesse come, bring her back to the theater. So they come back for her. They take her back to the theater. Then I'll get you that final part, Hockey, but I want to get your thoughts on this very dark scene. So the end result is the same, right? They don't reveal where Abby is to her, so she doesn't get it. Happens both in the game and this. They both die. They die slightly differently. But a dark scene, and the darkest scene, in my opinion, that we saw in season 2. This is what I thought we were going to see. The darkness from the game finally delivered here. Even though they watered down a lot of other stuff. What are your thoughts on this stuff, Aki?
Dude, it not happening in the game is actually very surprising. I thought this was a 1-to-1. I thought you were going to come on here and tell me that it was 1-to-1. That
not fully 1-to-1. Close, but that last aspect was not. Yep.
They both ended up dying, but wow, dude, this scene was crazy, right?
Yeah.
So she ends up killing 3 people and only really in at least the TV show, she was only trying to kill one person, and she ended up killing 3 people.
Yeah.
I think, when she's on the floor and she's telling Ellie, like, oh, you're doing a great job. Is it out yet? Is it out? Oh, I don't think she said, let me see the baby, but she was talking as if she was feeling Ellie cut the baby out.
Yeah.
Dude, I was sitting in my chair screaming at the TV, no way. This scene, talk about getting punched in the gut. This was the scene for me that was dude, this is crazy. Literally, they're showing us just the most traumatic experiences one could face in, again, I keep saying, a post-infected world, but this world is so messed up. And I think it's one of the best things that they've done throughout both seasons is they take the world and they literally hand it to you on a silver platter of hey dude, this world is super, super messed up. Here you go. Here's a crazy, insanely traumatic scene. Have fun with it, and this scene right here could have been one of the most traumatic scenes in the entire TV show. Even though they kind of skipped over Joel's, they kind of rushed through Joel's death, I still think this, even though the scene was a quick scene, was I don't know, bro. It could have been one of the saddest and most messed up scenes that I've seen, in my opinion, of the entire season 1 and season 2. I loved the scene. I also hated it because of what happened, but what a strong scene, bro.
And the impact, this is again when I say those changes, this one I didn't mind it, right? That change I didn't mind because the impact, the end result got you to where you needed to. The impact of what just happened. The kind of devastation it hits Ellie here. That's, again, you make those slight details change there, that wasn't a big deal to me because the end result was the impact was still the same. So I was cool with it. Then it gets back to the theater. So they talk about you gotta wait till the morning. Tommy sees that Ellie is messed up. So he just says, they were part of it. They were part of the group. They made the choices they made, and this is the result of that. And, but Ellie says, but Abby gets to live. And Tommy says, can you live with that? Right? So, and Ellie says, I'm going to have to. So then there's the discussion, then Tommy leaves, and then Ellie and Jesse have this conversation. And this is the kind of the contradiction. I do like the dynamic. And this is where you could tell me, Aki, you didn't play the game, right? So you could kind of feel like maybe this dynamic feels pretty good, even the things that they're saying to each other. But Ellie thanks Jesse for coming back for her. And, Jesse brings up, well, maybe Tommy forced me to go get you. And she said, is that true? And he says, no. And Ellie pretty much says that you're a good guy. And Jesse only came back because he feels like if he was in danger, you would set the world on fire to rescue him. Huh? This is the scene where I'm like, how'd you get that? Because the last time you spoke, she said, F the community. My community died when Joel got stomped out. And where did Jesse kind of get that idea from? It's like a hallucination. Did we miss a scene here? I prefer if Jesse was just real and said, that's the difference between me and you. Right? I mean, that to me makes more sense on how they set it up because they made her so inconsistent. And in the game, honestly, would have made sense because in the game, she wouldn't have. If Abby had to choose between Abby or saving Jesse, she'd go after Abby. She showed that. So to me, it would even make sense for them to hammer that home, but they're trying to paint this picture that Ellie still cares for the community. But the actions don't speak to that. So I don't know why Jesse would come. But then they hear ruffling coming up. They're making a bolt for the door. Door gets open. Pow! Jesse gets blasted. So we talk about Jesse. He's going to be a dad. They got to get their kid out of there. Jesse gets KO'd. Bullet to the face. Ellie goes down, and it's Abby. We've been searching for Abby, and now Abby is here. She tells him to get up. Tommy's been beat up. Ellie stands up, drops the gun, and then she says, she's about to kill him. She said, don't kill him. And he says, he killed my friends. And she says, no, it was me. I'm the one who killed your friends because I was looking for you. And then she says the line that comes directly. Now, that part that Ellie says to her is from the game. This part where she says, I let you live and you wasted it. A very great line. Love that in the game too, because what the scene that transpires, which I will save everyone, I will not spoil, is a great one. I don't know how they're going to do it in this one because the dynamics of the characters are so different from the game to what they are now. So definitely it piques my interest on how they're going to execute. I thought they were going to in this one, but they do not. You hear aim the gun and a gun goes off and it goes to the black screen. I hated that. Absolutely hated that. It made it so damn awkward because I'm like, okay, I knew it was going to be an awkward cut. Even if they got to the end of that scene, it was going to be an awkward cut. But this made it even more awkward. So it just goes to black and then all of a sudden it flashes back because we were in Seattle day 3. It flashes back to Seattle day 1. And now it's Abby waking up in a stadium, which is the Wolves base. And season ends. Boy, it felt like there was going to be another episode next week, wasn't there? So that's the part that hurts for me, is kind of this contradiction that they create for Ellie. This descent to madness, but this then... No, she's still the same Ellie we love. The inconsistencies there. Unfortunately, I've been so patient, but by the time we get to the end, it's just like, man, I can't... Like, it's staying the same. It's not... You're getting those signs there. But by this time in the game, it's not signs anymore. This is... Like, it's a fact about what Ellie is. But unfortunately, the show is tiptoeing around it. All right, Aki, what are your thoughts on this last scene as things closed out?
Yeah, listen, definitely a big cliffhanger here, but I feel like they didn't really even walk us to the cliff before they kind of pushed us off here. It was kind of just laid on us. And listen, the whole Jesse Ellie dynamic that we kind of saw in the last part there, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. It was a little confusing, but maybe they were just trying to find the good in each other after such a terrible situation that Ellie was just in. So again, I thought that was kind of weird, like you said, but the very ending, other than, the blackout screen at the end, I thought was pretty crazy. I didn't really think Jesse was going to get popped off like that. He is immediately dead. Like, through the door, he was just talking to Ellie, and he is instantly dead, right? Which is crazy. Tommy, I'm at least glad that he's alive. I have no idea what's going to happen to him, afterwards, or at least in the next season. But you got to see the dialogue between Ellie and Abby. I thought the one-liner or the two-liner that Abby said to Ellie was pretty cool. I gave you a chance and you pretty much wasted it. But yeah, dude, the gunshot to the black screen, again, cliffhanger without us actually getting to the cliff. Like you said, man, I thought at least another episode, maybe 2, to kind of draw it out would have been better. But yeah, dude, seeing the Seattle stadium, I don't know if that was a baseball stadium or whatever that was, but man, oh man, we've always talked about this throughout both seasons. The environment that they bring to the table is fantastic. And you saw it in this, the Wolf space. They got, it's like a farm. They got a military section to it. I mean, it was very, very cool, very dynamic. I'm excited to see what the next season brings, but if the first episode doesn't pop off, like right off the rip, I will be very disappointed.
Yeah, well, again, where it looks at, it kind of previewed what season 3 is. You had 3 days of Ellie in Seattle. Day 1, day 2, day 3. That was that last part in the theater. And then it flashed to day 1. So now it looks like season 3, you're 3 days of Abby's perspective. So that's where we're going to start seeing the Wolves and Seraphites. The heavy duty of that action there is going to be in this next season. So interested to see where things are. But that is our wrap up of Last of Us Season 2, Episode 7, Convergence, and the entirety of the season. But what are your thoughts? What was your favorite scene? What was your least favorite scene? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button to help support the channel. This is Frank and Aki from Marsman Gaming, signing off. Game on.